Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by BetterHelp.com and LittleShaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that most people unfortunately experience if they deal with narcissistic personalities, and that is that the punishment from this kind of person never ends. Pathologically narcissistic personalities are very punitive. This means they desire to punish others for the things that they believe that these others have done to them. They're easily offended, easily insulted, easily angered, and often feel rejected or attacked. They assign the blame for their feelings to other people, and if the feelings are negative, narcissists seek to punish these others for what they've supposedly done, which is considered by the narcissist to be incredibly, even unreasonably wrong and terrible. A crime of this magnitude simply cannot be allowed to stand. The other person absolutely must be punished for it. This is in part due to the size and constitution of the pathologically narcissistic ego, which is both enormous and almost absurdly fragile. This is a very bad combination because that makes it easy to damage and impossible to avoid. Not only do they think virtually everything is to or for or because of or about them because their ego is disproportionately huge, but because it's so fragile, virtually everything insults, offends, hurts, or upsets them. It can be so severe that it comes across as what looks like paranoia or even delusional thinking. This is a nightmare to try to navigate, and it's made even worse by the fact that because this type of personality is so self-focused and so egocentric, they generally cannot see any other interpretation of the facts, even when proof is right in front of them. It simply does not compute that they're not the reason for or the center of the situation or the event. And why would it compute? After all, they're the center of everything. If anyone claims otherwise, they're often accused of lying or being manipulative. When the ego has been damaged, it screams for vengeance. As we mature, we learn to address things in better, more productive, more pro-social ways. We might still be very angry. We might still feel that someone should face consequences for what they've done. But healthy adults don't usually attempt to punish other adults themselves. Narcissists are, of course, not healthy adults. We often find that much of their headspace is taken up with seething about and trying to find ways to punish people they believe have wronged them somehow. This punishment can include things that are just kind of annoying or childish to things that are outright malicious and dangerous. Not only do most people mature into dealing with things in a better way, most people have a balanced idea of which consequences would fit a situation. For narcissists, this ability can be pretty affected. These are people who might believe it's perfectly fine to burn down somebody's house over a bad review at work, or to kill somebody for giving them a dirty look. They might not all act on these things, of course, but we often find that most don't seem to recognize limits when it comes to punishing others, or think anything is too excessive when it comes to the misfortune that befalls people they believe have wronged them. Most adults also realize that punishing other adults comes with its own drawbacks and might end up hurting themselves as well in the process. Pathologically narcissistic people either do not realize this or do not care. They are perfectly willing to cut off their own nose to spite their own face, often repeatedly. If you're not familiar with that expression, to cut off your own nose to spite your face means that you are taking actions that are harming yourself as well as whoever you're intending to hurt. Arguably, narcissistic people can end up actually doing more damage to themselves in the long run because their constant punitive actions may eventually result in people refusing to deal with them at all anymore, leaving them with nobody who will put up with their behavior. They either don't realize that or they do, but they're not willing or able to stop themselves from doing it when they feel that they've been wronged. The ego is just too big and it's just too much of a force in their lives. One of the most difficult things to deal with when you're dealing with narcissistic people is the level of punishment involved in these relationships. Whether it is physically assaulting you, smearing you to other people behind your back, freezing you out in cold silence, calling you names, throwing tantrums when they don't get their way, doing things on purpose to make you angry or jealous, disappearing to worry, upset, or scare you, trying to make you feel guilty or otherwise bad, withholding things that you want or need, destroying your stuff, cheating on you, or anything else, there has most likely been a large amount of punitive behavior on the part of the narcissistic person you're dealing with, regardless of the type of relationship. Whether they're your mother, your brother, your husband, your girlfriend, or any other person to you, you've likely seen some of these things. In some ways, this is a defining characteristic of these personalities. The drive to punish appears to be multifaceted in narcissists. One we have already discussed, which is the involvement of the ego. This is sometimes known as a narcissistic injury, and it's the basis of most of the rage you see in these personalities, even when you can't figure out what the injury is or how they got it. The ego of narcissists is extremely fragile, which means it is essentially perpetually injured. Even things as small as saying hello in what they perceive to be a, quote, wrong tone of voice offends and hurts and insults and injures these personalities on a level that non-narcissistic people probably cannot even begin to understand. It sounds absurd, and it is absurd if we're being totally honest, but if you think about your interactions with this person through this lens, you will probably see that, absurd or not, it is the truth. They are constantly scanning situations for things that are intended to upset, hurt, insult, or offend them. And of course, they find these things because when you think the only person anyone is ever talking or thinking about is you, then everything they say and do is about you somehow. This is sometimes how narcissists end up telling on themselves as well, because they take an innocuous or unrelated comment to be about something that they're hiding or refusing to admit, and they inadvertently reveal that through their anger or by trying to defend themselves. This happens because it's what the comment meant to them. It's what they were thinking about, and they just assume this is also what you meant and what you were thinking about. Of course they assume that. No one else exists except for them. Another component of the drive to punish in narcissistic personalities appears to be the idea that punishing others is associated with power and control. If you are in the position of meting out punishment, you have all the power. Similar to being the parent in this situation, the person who is doling out the punishment is the boss. They have all the power and control in the situation. This is adjacent to the idea that if you're the punisher, you're righteous and, best of all, justified. You're not bad, the other person's bad. You're not wrong, the other person's wrong. You have done nothing to deserve punishment, the other person deserves the punishment. These concepts are all very, very important to the narcissistic personality structure. They must be powerful, they must be in control, they must be righteous and justified. Above all, they must not be bad, not be wrong, and not be the villain in any situation. Being in the position, the righteous position, to punish others meets every single one of these criteria. And the reality is, many of them enjoy causing pain to other people. It makes them feel powerful, something they don't feel in general and which they desire very much, but often lack the fortitude or ability to demonstrate, to capture. Narcissists are very much like children in this way. They feel powerless and unable to affect change in any real way on any real thing. So they play their little punishment power games and feel like they might actually be somebody for a while. Another, perhaps sadder, component of the drive to punish others is the reality that narcissistic personalities are unhappy, miserable, raging, infantile people who can do nothing with all of that misery and rage except dump it out onto others. They cannot hold it or process it or do anything with it at all except dump it. And it isn't enough just to release it. Somebody has to receive it. Somebody has to take it. Somebody has to be to blame for it. Somebody has to answer for it, or it can't be dumped. It's kind of like trying to deliver a package that has to be signed for. If nobody answers the door to take it, back into the truck it's going to go. And it will stay there until somebody takes delivery of it. This is one of the main functions of relationships for narcissists. They require others to take delivery of their packages. Their pain, their anger, their shame, their frustration, their failure, their inability. Someone has to answer for all these things, and it can't be the narcissists themselves. They cannot tolerate that. It is possible that many are not even capable of it by now. They must simply offload these things onto other people, and the things must be received or they can't be gone. That's where you come in. You are the person who's required to take all of these things. If you don't, you are considered to be a bad person who doesn't care, or whatever else will make you feel bad enough to take it. There's also the reality that part of the reason narcissists punish others is because they believe others are punishing them. This is a very common theme with pathologically narcissistic personalities, that they're being excessively punished, persecuted, or otherwise unfairly treated. It's likely that in many situations they really believe that. Realistically, they seem to have no real belief that they've ever done anything wrong. And even if they will agree that they have, any level of consequence is deemed unfairly punitive and even persecutory. This seems to happen in part because they themselves are so punitive, and in part because they have so much self-loathing and shame, they assume punishment is not only warranted, but inevitable. Bad people deserve punishment. You may have noticed this is a recurring theme in the vocabulary or the mindset of the narcissist that you know, regarding how they treat other people and or regarding how they believe they're being treated by others. Whoever hands out the punishment has all the power. And in the all-consuming power dynamics in the world of narcissistic people, you're either one or the other. Part of the reason why narcissists punish other people so harshly is that in their projected self-loathing, this is the punishment they deem necessary for the crime that has been committed. And they have to project it onto you. You're the one that committed the crime. Narcissists tend not to see consequences as naturally occurring or understandable, predictable things that result from one's own choices and behavior, but as things that are being done to them by somebody else, as punishments, in other words. And they resent that very much. So they punish you back, essentially, and the relationship becomes one long power struggle where the narcissist becomes more and more resentful, more and more angry, more and more offended, and feels more and more controlled, oppressed, or smothered and encroached upon by the other person. If you're dealing with a toxic narcissistic personality, the reality is that the punishment from these people never ends. They never forget anything that they believe you've done to them, and they will never let you live it down. There's no forgiveness, no good faith, no benefit of the doubt, just endless punishment for the failure to match up to the perfect image they erroneously created of you in the beginning. As we discussed in a previous episode of the show called The Loss is Permanent, in normal relationships between people, there is a period of idealization. It's usually not as intense or as unrealistic as the idealization in a relationship with a narcissist, but it does still happen. People end up seeing each other more realistically, and then they adjust to the realistic idea of the other person. With narcissists, this does not happen. There is no way to come back from this original loss of esteem in the narcissist's eyes. Due to their psychological rigidity and their lack of understanding regarding whole object relations, they have no ability to reconcile the real you with the image of you that they created, and they see your failure to live up to this as incredibly upsetting and shocking. It is not uncommon for narcissists to accuse people of tricking them or lying to them for not being what the narcissist thought they were. There is no way to make them understand that you didn't pretend to be anything. They just had the wrong idea about who and what you were. Their assumptions are seen as knowledge, and a contradiction to these assumptions is viewed as lying or manipulation on anybody else's part. You have fooled them in a very vicious and cruel way. You pretended to be caring and kind and perfect, and you're not. You lied to them. You made them look stupid. You tricked them. You embarrassed them. That needs to be answered for. Somebody is going to have to pay for that, and it isn't going to be them. Some narcissists leave or cut off relationships when this happens, but many others do not. Indeed, they will resist ending the relationship very strenuously and pursue reattachment continuously, while at the same time punishing and attacking the other person relentlessly, talking about how horrible both the relationship and the other person are. People often become totally frustrated and end up asking, if I'm so terrible, if it's all so bad, then why don't we just end the relationship? Why are you still here? Why do you insist on staying together? The narcissist often responds to this with even more abuse and or begins accusing the other person of trying to abandon or discard them instead of answering what is actually a very valid and reasonable question. The answer appears to be that narcissists literally need other people for survival. As we discussed earlier, they need other people to take delivery of their nasty little packages. They are dependent and not able to cope with very much at all if they don't have somebody who will do that. They also don't appear to be able to experience themselves except through the reactions and the input of other people. In a very sad irony, the worse they can claim that a relationship is, the worse they believe a relationship is, the better it makes them feel. Many of them are trying to recreate some old power dynamic that they can now achieve the upper hand in, thereby finally, quote, winning over a caregiver or some other perceived enemy from their past. Other people are dragged into this conflict unwillingly and installed into roles that they did not agree to or even know about, unwittingly playing out parts that were created way before they ever came along and receiving punishment that really belongs to somebody else. Though it is often very obvious to other people, it is useless to point this out to the narcissist. Narcissistic personalities do not see other people for who they are, and they don't see why it's necessary, so they have no desire to learn how to do that. These are very simple, almost primitive personalities that are guided by very complex forces that they do not appear to understand in the least or even care about trying to understand. They just react to what they perceive to be happening without appearing to ask themselves why or even exploring things to see if they make any sense. They appear to believe that their conclusion is always correct and therefore their reaction is always appropriate. Trying to tell them that there are some things that are never appropriate, no matter what you believe the other person has done, is useless as well. As we discussed in the episode of the show entitled Narcissists Have No Limits, they simply do not recognize limits in any form, either for their own behavior or pertaining to other people. They are like children in this way, reacting to big feelings with no brakes or controls at all and no understanding of why they should even have any. You hurt me, and now I will hurt you. You made me feel bad, now I will make you feel bad. There's no understanding or even acknowledgement that their feelings are coming from inside of them and might not even be related to the other person or any external events at all. They seem to believe their feelings are solely generated by things outside of themselves. This is dangerous because these are unhappy, mean-spirited, envious, frightened people who are almost always in the grip of some negative feeling that they need somebody to answer for. This is why in these relationships, the punishment never ends. They are always unhappy, and it is always someone else's fault. If you're in a relationship with someone who behaves this way, understand that there isn't anything you can do to change that because you're not being punished for your behavior. That's a justification because they can't understand their own emotional reactions and they immediately assume that someone else must have done something to cause these emotional reactions, so they look around for what that something was. They will always find it because you can always make something sound or look bad whenever you try. Many narcissists appear to be almost afraid of their emotions and reactions or ashamed of them, as if they believe that only bad people have bad feelings. So this has to be blamed on somebody else. I don't have bad feelings. I'm not a bad person. You are making me have bad feelings, therefore you are the bad person. This makes no sense to anyone except the narcissist, but it doesn't matter because it's the reality of the situation. You're not being punished for your behavior or anything you've actually done. You're being punished for their feelings, and there's nothing you can do about their feelings, regardless of what they say. If you could do anything about their feelings, this whole thing wouldn't be happening, and we would not be having this conversation right now. It's totally unfair, but it's a waste of time to try to address this because they don't see it that way. And for all intents and purposes, they probably can't. Remember, this is a primitive personality. The harsh reality is that some people should not be in relationships with others of any type, family, friends, romantic, or any other kind. They don't know how to treat people and they are not interested in learning. They only care about getting what they want, and if this hurts or inconveniences other people, they don't care about that. It doesn't matter to them. People sometimes ask if this means that narcissists don't deserve love. I don't believe that we are in charge of deciding what other people deserve or don't deserve. That's too much power for someone to somehow think they have over another person. Despite what our egos tell us, we are not in charge of what somebody else deserves or doesn't deserve, but this does not mean we're not allowed to decide for ourselves who we choose to interact with. I do not decide who deserves love or who doesn't deserve love as a human being, but I absolutely do have the right to decide who I give my time and energy to. That is never not up to me. Regardless of what our relationship is to this person, we actually do have a choice as to whether we deal with them or not. Even if you have children with someone and you're forced to deal with them due to a court order, there are ways to limit your interactions with them. If someone is abusive, if they're disrespectful, if they're unable to communicate, and if they're not interested in improving any of these things, there really isn't any other choice unless you are willing to tolerate being treated badly. The only thing you realistically can do in these situations is decide if you are going to tolerate someone constantly dumping their psychic, emotional garbage onto you because they can't deal with it themselves. You don't have to tolerate that. It's not your responsibility or even your place to take care of another adult's emotions for them. Doesn't have to be your problem too. If you choose to interact with this person anyway, beyond what is absolutely necessary, and to be perfectly honest, most interactions are not absolutely necessary, then you have to do so with the understanding that you do have a choice and this is the one that you're making. And do so with the understanding that the way this works isn't going to change. I hope that clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, and clinics throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we are running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. If you are interested in joining our support group with multiple monthly meetings, access to exclusive content, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by betterhelp.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, the Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.